Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. U.S. President Joe Biden has stepped aside in the 2024 presidential race after weeks of facing pressure to do so from his fellow Democrats. He is now endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris to be the new Democratic nominee. South Korea's military is blasting anti-Pyongyang loudspeaker broadcasts on all fronts after North Korea continued to send trash-carrying balloons over the border. Now, this is the first time in 6 years that the military aired them in full scale along all regions of the border. And starting Monday, local training hospitals begin posting job openings for trainee doctors to help reduce disruptions to medical services. They are set to begin training in September. With just 107 days before American voters go to the ballot, incumbent President Joe Biden announced he would drop out of the race and endorse his Vice President Kamala Harris. Seoul's top office says regardless of the administration, it will continue to work closely to develop the South Korea-U.S. alliance. Our Oh Soo-young leads us this afternoon.
U.S. President Joe Biden has dropped out of running for re-election, passing the torch to his Vice President Kamala Harris. Taking to social media platform X on Sunday, Biden said he would resign from his campaign for the November presidential election in the best interest of his party and the country, and focus on the remainder of his term. The announcement comes as Biden has been under growing pressure from fellow party members to drop out of the race, amid concerns about the 81-year-old leader's age, especially after struggling against his rival Donald Trump during last month's televised debate. Biden formally endorsed his running mate Harris, who said she intends to earn and win the nomination. She vowed to do everything she can, not only to unite the Democratic Party, but to unite the country and to defeat former President Donald Trump. Just hours before Biden announced his decision, Trump, as the Republican nominee, said the incumbent leader is not fit to serve another term and took a jab at the vice president, saying that Harris would be easier to beat than Biden. While there are only 107 days until voters make their choice, observers say it is yet unclear who will be at the top of the Democratic Party's ticket, as some party members call for an open nomination process. In a statement Sunday, Democratic National Committee Chair Jamie Harrison made it clear there would be no automatic succession from Biden to Harris, saying the party would pursue an orderly and transparent selection process. Harris will have to secure the nomination in a vote by roughly 4,700 Democratic Convention delegates. In light of the developments in the US presidential race, South Korea's top office told reporters it would not comment on the domestic politics of foreign countries. However, a presidential official said there is bipartisan support within the United States for the South Korea-US alliance, and that Seoul will continue to work closely with Washington to further develop their bilateral global comprehensive strategic alliance. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
North Korea's continued sending of trash-carrying balloons has prompted South Korea to expand its loudspeaker propaganda broadcast in all frontline units over the weekend. The broadcasts have been on since 6 a.m. this morning again and will run for 16 hours straight. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea's military has been conducting anti-Pyongyang loudspeaker broadcasts on all fronts for the second straight day. The Joint Chiefs of Staff said Monday that the military began broadcasting at 6 a.m. and will continue for about 16 hours until 10 p.m. On Sunday, the military aired anti-Pyongyang loudspeaker broadcasts on all fronts for the first time since the 2018 Inter-Korean military agreement. The South had been partly airing the broadcast at different times in Western, Central, and Eastern fronts. But now, the military is airing full-scale propaganda broadcasts along the entire border. The broadcasts are typically comprised of news and K-pop, but the latest ones reportedly included news on the recent defection of a North Korean diplomat, as well as the killing of North Korean soldiers while laying mines near the border.
We believe our broadcast will have a variety of effects, such as causing internal unrest, defections from North Korea, and also affect discipline.
The military is also planning to operate mobile loudspeakers, which can be quickly operated if North Korea continues to engage in provocations.
On Sunday, fixed loudspeakers were operated on all fronts. Mobile loudspeakers will also be operated in the future.
South Korea's military currently possesses a total of 40 anti-North Korea loudspeakers, including 24 fixed and 16 mobile ones. The military stepped-up campaign comes in response to North Korea's continued deliveries of trash-carrying balloons. On Sunday, North Korea sent another 500 balloons, mostly carrying scraps of paper. Around 240 of them fell in South Korea, mostly in Seoul and North Gyeonggi-do province. This is the 9th round of deliveries sent by the North since May. The regime is presumed to have sent a total of more than 2,000 balloons so far in protest against anti-Pyongyang leaflet campaigns by North Korean defectors in the South. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
South Korea's Unification Ministry had said North Korea cannot distort history in response to a North Korean article criticizing ROK U.S. military drills ahead of the 71st anniversary of signing the Armistice Agreement. In a regular briefing on Monday, the Unification Ministry spokesperson said North Korea is distorting history by playing the victim, referring to the Korean War, which was the regime's outright invasion against the South, backed by Soviet and Chinese support. This is in response to an article by Pyongyang's official Dodong-sinmun newspaper that criticized the ROK U.S. joint military drills, calling them continued war invasion exercises against the North for the past 70 years. And the South Korean government has urged the citizens not to violate any laws, referring to a possible visit by South Korean students to North Korea. The spokesperson for the Unification Ministry said on Monday that citizens abroad wishing to visit the North must comply with the procedures outlined in the Inter-Korean Exchange and Cooperation Act, which requires reporting trips to the North in advance. Japan's Mainichi Shimbun reported on Sunday that 140 students of Korea University in Tokyo gained approval from the North's leader to visit North Korea from late August. The school is run by a North Korean affiliated organization in Japan and has students with South Korean nationality. Starting Monday, the South Korean government begins recruiting trainee doctors for the second half of this year to fill up vacancies left by trainee doctors who walked away from work over the government's medical reform. Lee In-jin has the details.
The country's 5 major training hospitals are set to begin hiring around 7,700 trainee doctors starting Monday until the end of the month. The government is recruiting new trainee doctors to minimize the impact of mass resignations in February when more than 90% of around 13,000 medical interns and residents walked off their jobs. To minimize the impact of the mass resignations, the government continues its push to recruit more medical students, as well as offering a penalty exemption for returning junior doctors.
And while the core steps were similar to the previous regular recruitment process, additional measures have been introduced for this particular occasion, as special immunitative provisions for those returning from the strike. So this provision is designed to help trainee doctors catch up on missed training and qualify for specialist license without being penalized. And as a whole, it aims to ensure a swift return to normal operations in hospitals. And it seems that the government is now encouraging doctors to return by offering favorable conditions for completing their training and earning licenses rather than threatening suspensions or indictments.
In the months-long standoff, doctors have demanded the government revisit a decision to increase medical school quotas, claiming that medical schools will not be able to handle the increased enrollment. But in an effort to address the nationwide issue of doctor shortages, the government has already finalized an admissions quota hike of approximately 1,500 students for medical schools next year. In response to the start of the recruitment drive on Monday, medical professors in protest have warned they'll boycott their training programs by refusing to take part in education and training programs for trainee doctors set to begin their studies in September. Lee In-jin, Arirang News.
The South Korean defense industry continues to see positive momentum, recording increased sales and profits in the second quarter of this year. According to Yonhap Infomix on Monday, the 4 major defense companies, Hanwha Aerospace, Korea Aerospace Industries, Hyundai Rotem, and LIG Nextone saw further growth in the second quarter thanks to a large backlog of orders. The combined operating profit of the 4 major defense companies is estimated at $296.58 million. The figures mark a 107.4% increase compared to the same period last year. And the estimated combined sales of the four companies in the second quarter came out to $3.76 billion, a 28.8% increase on year. Despite sluggish domestic consumption trends, South Koreans have been spending more abroad, as many of them turn to overseas destinations with eased travel restrictions in the post-pandemic era. That's according to the state-run Korea Development Institute's most recent economic trends report released 2 weeks ago. Now, preliminary data from the Bank of Korea released earlier this month showed that the country saw tourism deficits of $860 million in May. Koreans spent over $2.3 billion overseas that month. That's the most since 2019 and a jump of nearly 5% on year. However, domestic retail sales dropped over 3% on month in May for a third consecutive time. And more people here in the country are choosing cheaper domestic airlines to travel overseas, according to data released by the Transport Ministry on Monday. Of the total number of passengers flying abroad between January and June this year, low-cost domestic airlines such as Jeju Air and Jin Air accounted for 35.6% of passengers. Now, bigger domestic airlines took a smaller portion of the pie at just over 33%, while foreign airlines took around 31%. This has been attributed to bigger airlines focusing on long-distance travel and cargo flights that leave a greater profit margin, while the smaller airlines are concentrated on shorter distance flights to popular destinations. Ramen has become one of South Korea's strong and reliable exports. And with overseas shipments of ramen showing an upward trend in recent months, companies are jumping in to keep this momentum going forward. Lee Soo-jin has more.
More than 2 million packs of ramyeon are produced at this factory each month, and more than 400,000 of them are shipped overseas. But these figures are unsurprising as exports of South Korea's ramyeon surged more than 30% to reach nearly $600 million in value during the first half of the year.
At this ramen factory, you can see how in certain steps of the production process, how South Korean companies have begun to target directly overseas consumers to keep this momentum going.
The Seoul metropolitan government has teamed up with this local company to release Seoul ramyeon both domestically and abroad in hopes that ramyeon becomes a food that the capital city becomes known for globally. To further cement its popularity, they have produced ramyeon that's not just delicious but also healthy by using non-fried noodles instead of the more common fried noodles. Non-fried ramyeon noodles, just like the ones that are fried, also take on the famous wavy form that allows them to be cooked almost instantly. But instead of frying the noodles after they're steamed at high temperatures, they're dried by hot air. Each batch is air-cooled inside these machines before being dropped to conveyor belts below where they're packaged to be shipped abroad. But in their global expansion efforts, companies are at a crossroads of whether they should pursue a localized or a standardized marketing strategy.
Whether to localize our products was our biggest concern, but we've recently decided to deliver the most authentic taste to our global consumers. And we've done so by using Korea's Cheongyang chili pepper in our soup.
Still others have decided to localize some of their products. Buldak ramen, which went viral on social media, has flavors only available overseas, such as the habanero lime buldak, which was developed solely for North and South American consumers.
I think localization is a good strategy, but companies should also promote traditional Korean flavors as well, perhaps through TikTok challenges.
In the future, according to the expert, the key to continuing the export growth will be figuring out various ways to effectively market ramyeon that remains authentic in its taste. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
We are at the peak of this year's monsoon season here in South Korea. And locals, especially those in flood-prone areas, are doing all they can to prevent damage. An Sung-jin has this report.
Water sweeps through the streets. It soon fills every inch of the road, taking with it any object in its way, even people.
That's the road where a man died. The intersection heading down that way.
Water reached up to my shin while I was working, so most of the stores in the basement saw damage. I couldn't go home because the entire area was flooded.
This is a glimpse of what happened 2 years ago when heavy rain swept through, blocking off buildings and roads, causing chaos. Since then, people in the area fear that the same thing will happen again.
That manhole cover bounced off. We were so surprised. Then whenever it rains, it starts to stress me out. I still have a trauma from then.
Now the janitor brings out the water barrier to make sure that rain doesn't leak into restaurants and buildings. Some experts say the geographical layout is a factor as the area is low-lying. But one professor says that there is another crucial during times of heavy downpours.
As I said, if there is a problem with the drainage system in the city, and if it's left as it is, the same problems will occur every year. If leaves or trash gets clogged up, it needs to be cleaned out quickly by local district offices.
2 years ago, this area of Gangnam-gu district in capital Seoul saw massive damage from flash floods. Every year, flood-prone areas of the city face some degree of damage. How are cities trying to prevent this through an effective drainage system? There are many ways to keep the city's drainage system working and protect people's lives when flooding starts. For instance, local business owners like pharmacist Kim Young-nan would head out to the storm drain in front of her shop to make sure that it wasn't clogged.
If the storm drain is covered, the area becomes more flood-prone, so it needs a lot of attention.
Especially during the summer when it rains a lot, Kim says she puts extra effort to make sure.
It only takes a minute or two, and just a little bit of attention can reduce the damage. I started to help out to prevent further flooding.
Just like her, the district of Nuwongu cooperates with more than 2,000 different business owners to keep the storm drains clean by appointing them as protectors.
Previously, it would take 2 to 3 days for us to go around and check the drains. Now, with the help of these people, from receiving the report to fixing it can be done within a day. These people have volunteered to help take care of these storm drains.
They also added QR codes for each of the drains in the district to establish a more organized system to report any that aren't functioning properly. On average, around 20 reports come in daily. According to the National Disaster Management Research Institute, if the storm drain is covered even slightly more than half, the possibility of flooding doubles. Water can often spill out from manholes with the covers floating away. To prevent casualties, cities have implemented a preventive system. This metal plate, which can hold up to 400 kilograms, ensures that nobody falls through the manhole. These efforts are crucial, especially as South Korea this summer is looking to see one of its worst rainfalls yet, with 50% more precipitation compared to last year.
It's not necessarily that this year is the worst. Every year we may see stronger and stronger rain. If we look at the pattern for this year, the sea temperature around the peninsula is high, which constantly creates vapor, and there is an influx of low-pressure air from the west which clashes and creates rain clouds.
Meteorological predictions are difficult to make. No matter how many times we check weather apps, weather forecasts are rarely precise. What's important is keeping track of what's happening in real time and responding with proper measures. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that he will be dispatching a delegation to negotiate a hostage deal with Hamas on Thursday. The statement released on Sunday by the Israeli leader's office, however, did not state the destination of the delegation. The hostage talks are expected to be a key issue during Netanyahu's meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden this week. This comes as the Israeli military said on the same day that it shut down a ballistic missile launched by Iran-backed Houthi militants in Yemen. Now, the missile was fired in response to Israel's strikes on a Yemeni port city the previous day, which marked the first time Israel has struck Yemen since the Israel-Hamas war began in October.
Now, Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. Airlines over the weekend struggled to recover from Friday's global cyber outage, which left thousands stranded at airports. The effects of a flawed software update issued by one of the largest firms in the cybersecurity industry, CrowdStrike, extended beyond airports, with government agencies, banks, businesses, health and education sectors suffering from disruptions. Some 8.5 million devices were affected by the computer glitch, with the US one of the places hardest hit. According to flight tracking websites, more than 1,200 international flights passing by the United States have been cancelled as of early Sunday afternoon, while 5,000 domestic US flights were delayed on Sunday. Globally, there were some 46,000 total delays on Friday and at least 30,000 delays on Sunday, according to FlightAware.com. CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz said that while a fix has been deployed, getting systems back in order will take time. Bangladesh's Supreme Court on Sunday scrapped most of its quotas on public sector government jobs, a policy that has sparked mass protests across the country, leaving at least 115 people dead. Bangladesh's Supreme Court's Appellate Division dismissed the lower court's order and directed that 93% of government jobs should be open to all candidates based on merit. After weeks of turmoil, army squads were deployed throughout the city of Dhaka, but surrounding streets were reportedly quiet in the wake of the decision. Law Minister Anisul Huq said that the government would implement the ruling within days. A third of all public sector jobs had been reserved for families and relatives of veterans from Bangladesh's War of Independence from Pakistan in 1971, but that has been reduced to just 5%. 2% will remain reserved for people from ethnic minorities and those with disabilities. Thousands of anti-tourism protesters took to the streets in Spain's Palma de Mallorca on Sunday as demonstrations against the country's key industry continue. According to authorities, around 10,000 protesters came out in Mallorca carrying makeshift models of cruise ships and planes, as well as pickets reading "No to mass tourism," "Stop private jets," and "Your luxury, our misery." Similar protests have also taken place in Barcelona, as well as Malaga and the Canary Islands, where residents say they are suffering from a tourist-driven rise in housing and living costs. The Balearic Islands, the second most popular holiday destination in Spain, with 14.4 million tourists last year, generates some 45% of their GDP from tourism. Slovenian cyclist Tadej Pogačar won this year's Tour de France on Sunday to complete a sensational Tour de France Giro d'Italia double. He becomes the first person since 1998 to win cycling's two biggest races in the same year. Pogačar cemented his victory by winning the stage 21 time trial, cycling the 33.7-kilometer individual time trial from Monaco to Nice in 45 minutes and 24 seconds. It was the sixth stage of the Tour won by Pogačar and extended his lead over the defending champion Jonas Vingegaard of Denmark to a margin of 6 minutes and 17 seconds. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Central regions are forecast to see on and off rainfall today. The capital area could see more than 80 millimeters of downpours, while Chungcheongdo provinces could also see rain passing by during the day today. And it's Daeseol today, the hottest day of the year. Many regions had a tropical night overnight, and Gangneung had a super tropical night with overnight temperatures staying above 30 degrees Celsius all night. But rain-free regions will be very hot today with heat alerts being in place. So Daegu and Gyeongju get up to 35 degrees. Seoul sees a high of 28 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Monsoon rain continues in central regions through Wednesday, but the latter half of the week's forecast could be affected by tropical storm Kemi. That typhoon, which developed northeast of Manila, is forecast to make landfall in southern regions of Shanghai, China later next week. It might impact the Korean peninsula, and we'll keep you updated as the situation develops. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have at this hour. Arirang News will be back at 2 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.